They laughed at my $12 Walmart shoes during the executive meeting, making me the office joke for 37 days straight. 6 months later, their Fortune 500 company was hemorrhaging millions while I sipped coffee across the street, watching their stock plummet in real time. My name is Michael Reeves, and I'm the consultant they fired for not fitting the corporate image. What they never discovered was that my shabby shoes contained the evidence of their billion-dollar fraud scheme, evidence I'd been collecting for 3 years. But before I reveal how their mockery cost them everything, let me introduce you to the people who thought appearance mattered more than integrity. I woke up at 4:45 a.m. every day, the same routine for the past 7 years since joining Meridian Technologies. My one-bedroom apartment in the unfashionable part of Boston wasn't much, but it was mine, paid for with honest work and dedication. By 5:30, I'd be on the Red Line subway, holding the leather portfolio my grandfather had given me when I graduated with my MBA. "Remember, Mickey," he'd said, using my childhood nickname, "integrity isn't negotiable." That portfolio contained every note from every meeting I'd ever attended at Meridian. My desk was in the corner of the 32nd floor, always neat, always organized. 3 framed photos: Mom before cancer took her, Dad at his retirement party, and my niece Sarah on her 5th birthday. Those pictures reminded me why I worked 70-hour weeks analyzing financial data that most people would find mind-numbing. I was good at finding patterns, spotting irregularities. Meridian paid me well enough, $92,000 a year, and I was respected, if not particularly noticed. "Morning, Mike," Jason would say as he passed my desk at precisely 8:07 each day. As CFO, he could have ignored me completely, but Jason Forrester wasn't like the other executives. He'd worked his way up just like me. "Those quarterly projections look solid," he told me one Tuesday in March. "You're the only one who actually reads the fine print, aren't you?" He smiled, but something in his eyes didn't match his mouth. I should have noticed that. My immediate supervisor, Vanessa Chen, had hired me personally. "Your attention to detail is exceptional," she'd said during my interview. We'd developed a professional rhythm over the years. She'd drop complex financial analyses on my desk, and I'd find the story behind the numbers. "Michael sees what others miss," she'd tell new team members. I trusted her completely. The first hint came during the Q1 review. CEO Richard Harmon mentioned extraordinary growth in our Asian markets, but the shipping manifests I'd reviewed showed a 22% decrease in actual product movement. When I mentioned this privately to Vanessa, she smiled tightly. "Sometimes the bigger picture requires creative accounting, Michael. Don't worry about it." Creative accounting? In my vocabulary, that translated to fraud. But I convinced myself I'd misunderstood. Meridian was too reputable for that. Then came the unexplained transfers to subsidiary accounts I couldn't access. Unusual payment patterns to vendors that didn't seem to exist beyond a PO box. Inventory discrepancies that no one wanted to discuss. Small things, individually meaningless, collectively damning. I started working later, downloading records after everyone had left. Nothing illegal, these were reports I had permission to access, but I compiled them differently, cross-referencing data points that were intentionally kept separate. A pattern emerged. Meridian was inflating its value by nearly 40%, reporting phantom profits to drive stock prices while executives quietly sold their shares. One night, Vanessa came back unexpectedly and found me still there at 10:30 p.m. "Working late?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Just catching up on some analytics," I said, quickly switching screens. She lingered at my door. "You know, Michael, loyalty is everything in this business. The team needs to know you're on board with our vision." "Of course," I said, but something had changed between us. The trust was gone, replaced by something colder, more calculating. A week later, I was invited to the executive board meeting, an unprecedented honor for someone at my level. "Your insights have been valuable," Richard's email stated. We'd like your input on our Southeast Asian expansion. I prepared meticulously, thinking this was my moment. I wore my best suit, 8 years old but well-maintained. The only thing I couldn't replace were my shoes. The soles were wearing thin, but a new pair of dress shoes would have to wait until next month's paycheck. I'd polished my old Walmart specials until they gleamed, hoping no one would notice. They noticed immediately. "My God, Reeves, did you mug a homeless person for those shoes?" Richard laughed as I entered the conference room. The other executives joined in, except for Jason, who studied his notepad intently. $12 special, right? Sneered Thomas Green, the chief marketing officer. My gardener wouldn't wear those to mulch my roses. I froze. My carefully prepared presentation clutched in suddenly sweaty hands. I have the analytics you requested. How can we trust financial analysis from someone who can't even afford decent footwear? Richard wiped tears of laughter from his eyes. What message would that send to our clients? Trust us with your millions, even though our own staff shops at discount stores. The room erupted again. My face burned. 7 years of dedicated service reduced to a punchline about cheap shoes. Perhaps we should focus on Michael's work rather than his wardrobe, Jason suggested quietly, but it was too late. I'd been branded. Vanessa avoided eye contact entirely. She'd known about this ambush, I realized. She'd set me up. Nevertheless, Richard continued after the laughter subsided, we do have a serious expansion to discuss. Michael, why don't you wait outside while we handle the important matters? Vanessa will fill you in on anything you need to know. I stood there, presentation in hand, completely humiliated. 7 years of 4:45 a.m. alarms, of missed holidays and weekends spent poring over spreadsheets, reduced to a joke about $12 shoes. I walked out without a word, the sound of their laughter following me down the corridor. That night, I didn't sleep. I reviewed everything I'd collected over the past months. The evidence was irrefutable. Systematic fraud at the highest levels. I'd been naive, thinking the company valued integrity the way my grandfather had taught me. I placed the documents in my grandfather's portfolio and made 3 copies, storing them in separate locations. The next morning, my security badge didn't work. Security met me in the lobby. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves, your employment has been terminated," the guard said, handing me a small box containing my 3 photographs and nothing else. "Miss Chen said your personal items would be forwarded." "What about my files, my computer?" "Already cleared, company property." He looked genuinely apologetic. "Policy for immediate terminations." Immediate terminations? My stomach dropped. On what grounds? "Above my pay grade, sir. The paperwork says failure to align with company values and image requirements." He lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, I think it's bull. You were always decent to me." I stood on the sidewalk outside Meridian Tower, holding a cardboard box containing 7 years of my life. Fired because of Walmart shoes and because I'd seen too much. The spiral happened faster than I could have imagined. Without a reference from Meridian, finding another financial analyst position proved impossible. Human resources departments would sound enthusiastic on the phone, then go silent after contacting Vanessa. I later learned she was telling them I'd been fired for ethical concerns, a death sentence in the financial sector. Month 1. My emergency fund covered rent and basic expenses. I sold my laptop, $400, my grandfather's watch, $1,200, and my small collection of rare books, $860. Month 2. I downgraded my phone plan, canceled streaming services, and started eating ramen for 2 meals a day. Applied for 74 positions, received 3 callbacks, 0 offers. Month 3. Rent was due and my account showed $127.42. I sold my car, a 2012 Honda Civic with 142,000 miles for $4,100, about half its value, but I needed cash immediately. The property management company informed me they wouldn't be renewing my lease. "Nothing personal," the manager said, "but we've received complaints about your appearance." I hadn't been able to afford a haircut in weeks. My sister Janet called after I missed our weekly Sunday check-in. "Michael, what's going on? Mom's worried sick." I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything. Just a temporary setback, between jobs. "Come stay with us," she offered immediately. "Sarah would love having her uncle around." Pride made me refuse. "I've got some promising leads. I'll be fine." My college friend Trevor was less subtle when we met for what I couldn't afford to call a coffee. "Jesus, Mike, you look like hell," he said, buying me a sandwich I pretended not to desperately need. "What happened to the Meridian hotshot?" When I told him about the shoes, the firing, the blacklisting, he shook his head. "That's insane. Have you considered legal action?" "Can't afford a lawyer," I admitted. "And they've got their bases covered. On paper, I was fired for image non-compliance, which isn't technically illegal." "What about the fraud you found? That's whistleblower territory." Without access to the evidence on my work computer, it's just my word against an entire executive board. Month 4. I moved into a room in a shared house in Dorchester, paying weekly because I couldn't commit to a month. My new roommates included a night shift nurse, a food delivery driver, and a man named Ellis who never specified his occupation but always seemed to have cash. The room cost $175 a week, leaving me with dwindling savings. I took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store, $14.50 an hour, working midnight to 8 a.m. Between shifts, I continued applying for financial positions. Month 5. The breaking point came when I saw Vanessa and Richard leaving an upscale restaurant as I was biking past on my way to a job interview. They were laughing, champagne-flushed, celebrating a recent stock price surge that financial news called Meridian's miraculous recovery. They walked right past me, Vanessa in designer heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent, Richard checking his Rolex, and neither recognized the unshaven man on the second-hand bicycle. That night, my last copy of the fraud evidence disappeared from my room. No sign of forced entry, nothing else taken. Just the manila envelope containing everything I had on Meridian's fraud. When I confronted Ellis, he shrugged. "Don't know what you're talking about, man." "Did they pay you? Was it Meridian?" His eyes narrowed. "Look, I don't know what you're mixed up in, but you should probably find another place to stay." He slipped his hand into his pocket, and I saw the outline of something that made my blood run cold. I left that night with only a backpack containing clothes, my phone, and my grandfather's empty portfolio, the one thing I couldn't bring myself to sell. My first night truly homeless, I huddled in the doorway of a closed bank, bitterly aware of the irony. The temperature dropped to 38 degrees, and the thin jacket I'd thought adequate for a Boston autumn proved useless against the wind tunneling between buildings. By dawn, I couldn't feel my fingers. A police officer rousted me at 5:30 a.m. "Can't stay here, buddy. Move along." "Where?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He sighed, not unkindly. "Shelter on Albany opens at 7. They might have a bed." They didn't. "Full capacity," said the weary intake worker. "Try again tomorrow, earlier." I wandered downtown, unwashed, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd had on for 3 days. Outside a coffee shop, I saw my reflection in the window, hollow-eyed, gaunt, unrecognizable even to myself. Inside, executives in perfect suits sipped $7 lattes, their shoes gleaming, their future secure. One man stepped out, nearly colliding with me, then recoiled. "Sorry," he muttered, then hesitated. "Wait, Michael? Michael Reeves?" It was Jason Forrester, the only executive who hadn't laughed at my shoes. I tried to walk away, but he caught my arm. "My God, what happened to you?" "What do you think happened?" My voice was bitter, unfamiliar to my own ears. "Meridian happened. Vanessa happened. You happened, with your silent complicity." Shame crossed his face. "I didn't know they'd fire you. I tried to reach out afterward, but you'd disappeared." "Save it," I pulled away. "Go back to your fraud factory." "Michael, wait!" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. I thought he was going to offer me money, and my humiliation was complete. "I don't want your charity." "It's not—" He fumbled with a business card. "Look, I left Meridian 2 months ago. I couldn't stomach it anymore. There are people who would be very interested in what you know." I laughed, a harsh sound. "Everything I had is gone. They took it all." "Everything?" His eyes locked with mine. I thought of my grandfather's empty portfolio. "Everything that matters." He pressed the card into my hand anyway. "If you change your mind." Then he walked away, shoulders hunched against a weight I recognized all too well. That night, I found a spot under a highway overpass, sharing space with 3 other men. One, a grizzled veteran named Curtis, showed me how to make a pillow from a trash bag filled with crumpled newspaper. "First night's the hardest," he said, offering me half a sandwich someone had given him. "Second night's the second hardest. After that, you stop counting." I stared at the card Jason had given me, illuminated by the headlights of passing cars above. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. If you've been touched by this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, tell me, have you ever experienced betrayal or injustice? Let's create a supportive community together. The woman wore a charcoal pantsuit and practical shoes that somehow still looked expensive. She found me in the public library, where I'd been spending days, using the free internet to search for jobs and the bathrooms to wash up as best I could. "Mr. Reeves?" She didn't extend her hand. Smart. I hadn't showered properly in weeks. "Who's asking?" My voice was guarded. Curtis had warned me about people looking for homeless men, usually religious groups with conditions attached to their help, or worse, those looking to exploit desperation. "Special Agent Diana Mercer, FBI." She placed her credentials on the table between us. "May I sit?" I nodded, suddenly conscious of my appearance, my smell. "Jason Forrester suggested I find you," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. "He mentioned you might have information regarding Meridian Technologies." I laughed bitterly. Had, past tense, everything was stolen. Stolen? Her eyebrow arched slightly. "From my room, the one place I kept my backup evidence." I shook my head. "Meridian's thorough, I'll give them that." She didn't immediately respond, just studied me with calculating eyes. "Mr. Reeves, what if I told you Jason Forrester turned over a significant cache of documents to our office 3 weeks ago? Documents that corroborate what you apparently discovered?" My heart skipped. "Jason?" "He said he was inspired by a colleague who was punished for their integrity." She slid a manila folder across the table. "But his evidence is incomplete. We need someone who understands how all the pieces fit together." Inside the folder was a single photograph. Vanessa Chen shaking hands with a man I recognized from news articles as Viktor Zakharov, a Russian investor with questionable connections. "We've been investigating Meridian for 9 months. International money laundering, securities fraud, tax evasion. But we need someone on the inside, someone who knows where the bodies are buried." "I'm hardly an insider anymore." I gestured at my ragged appearance. "Appearances can be deceiving. That's what they're counting on, that no one would believe someone like you over them." She leaned forward. "We want to offer you a deal, Mr. Reeves." "Consultant status with the Bureau during this investigation." I blinked. "A job?" "With housing allowance, per diem, and witness protection if necessary." She named a figure that made me dizzy. Plus potential whistleblower compensation if the case results in financial recovery. It seemed too good to be true. Why me? Why not just use Jason? Because you found it first, before you even knew what you were looking for. You saw patterns others missed. And frankly, because you have nothing left to lose, which makes you both dangerous and valuable to us. She slid another document forward, a confidentiality agreement and preliminary contract. "There's something else you should know," she said as I skimmed the paperwork. "We believe the evidence stolen from your room wasn't taken by Meridian. It was taken by another interested party." Who? Ever heard of Sentinel Capital? The name was vaguely familiar, a private equity firm known for aggressive acquisitions. They've been circling Meridian for months, looking for leverage for a hostile takeover. We think they identified you as a potential source of information. How would they even know about me? The same way we did. Financial crimes leave digital fingerprints. Someone accessing certain files, downloading specific reports, it creates patterns. Both our analysts and theirs identified unusual access patterns from your terminal at Meridian. The scope of what she was saying hit me. So there are 3 separate groups interested in what I found? The FBI, Sentinel Capital, and Meridian itself? 4, actually. She slid one final document across the table. This was sent to our office anonymously 3 days ago. It was a bank statement showing a series of transfers from offshore accounts to personal accounts belonging to Richard Harmon and Thomas Green, accounts that matched patterns I'd identified months ago. But the statement was dated last week, information I couldn't possibly have had access to. Someone else inside Meridian is talking, I realized. We believe so, but they're being cautious. They sent this directly to us, with a note saying to find Michael Reeves. My mind raced. Vanessa? Agent Mercer shrugged. Possibly. People get nervous when investigations start. They look to save themselves. Or Jason sent it. Mr. Forrester has been cooperative, but he claims not to have this level of access. I sat back, the implications washing over me. The evidence I'd collected hadn't just disappeared, it had propagated. Multiple copies now existed, held by different players with different agendas. My findings had taken on a life of their own. What exactly would I be doing as your consultant? I asked. Helping us build our case, explaining the evidence we have, identifying additional sources of information. And then what? Trial testimony? Possibly. But given the international implications, this may resolve through regulatory action rather than criminal proceedings. The executives might escape jail, but would face financial ruin and professional death. The company would pay massive fines. Not perfect justice, but justice nonetheless. What about Sentinel Capital? If they have my evidence too, what's stopping them from moving against Meridian before you can build your case? That's partly why we need you now. We're in a race. She checked her watch. I need your answer, Mr. Reeves. We have a safe house ready and clothes waiting. I thought about Curtis under the overpass, sharing his sandwich. About the security guard who'd apologized while escorting me from the building. About my grandfather's voice. Integrity isn't negotiable. I'll do it, I said, taking the pen she offered. But not just to take down Richard and Vanessa. They deserve what's coming, but this is bigger than revenge. What is it about then? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I thought about the executives in their perfect suits, laughing at $12 shoes while orchestrating billion-dollar fraud schemes. It's about the system that values appearance over substance, that rewards deception and punishes honesty. As I signed the agreement, Agent Mercer's phone buzzed. Her expression changed as she read the message. Well, Mr. Reeves, it seems our timeline just accelerated. Sentinel Capital announced a surprise bid for controlling interest in Meridian Technologies this morning. The stock is already dropping as rumors swirl. For the first time in months, I smiled. Then we'd better get to work. Did this twist surprise you? This isn't over yet. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that life can turn around when you least expect it. 2 months later, I sat in a conference room at the FBI field office, dressed in a tailored suit that Agent Mercer had insisted upon. "Appearances matter in this phase," she'd explained, without a trace of irony. On the table before me lay the results of our work. 16 binders of meticulously organized evidence, financial records cross-referenced with email communications, phone records, and travel itineraries. 3 whiteboards covered in timelines, company structures, and transaction flows. 6 federal agents and 4 SEC investigators had worked with me around the clock. "Meridian's stock has fallen 64% since Sentinel's initial move," reported Agent Carlos Diaz, updating the room. "They've withdrawn their takeover bid as of this morning." "Smart move," I commented. "They realized there's no value left to extract." Diana nodded. "They got what they wanted: chaos and devaluation. They'll circle back in 6 months and buy the pieces at pennies on the dollar." The door opened and Assistant Director Keller entered. "The warrants just came through. We move in 1 hour." "All targets?" Diana asked. "All except Forrester. His cooperation agreement stands." He looked at me. "You're ready for this, Reeves?" Was I ready to watch the people who destroyed my life be brought to justice? Who wouldn't be? Yet the anticipation I'd expected to feel, satisfaction, vindication, even schadenfreude, was muted. In its place was something more complex: the weight of consequences set in motion, lives that would be irrevocably changed. Not just the executives, but ordinary Meridian employees who'd wake up tomorrow to find their company in shambles, their jobs in jeopardy, their retirement accounts decimated. "Yes, sir," I answered. "I'm ready." We moved with the precision of a military operation. 3 FBI teams simultaneously entered Meridian Tower, Richard Harmon's Beacon Hill mansion, and Vanessa Chen's Cambridge condo. I accompanied the team to Meridian wearing a bulletproof vest under my new suit. Standard procedure, Diana had assured me. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt surreal. Employees stared as we passed, whispers following in our wake. I recognized faces, people who'd averted their eyes when I was fired, who'd pretended not to know me when I fell. Now they stared in confusion and fear. Richard was in the executive conference room, the same room where they'd mopped my shoes. He was leading a crisis meeting about the plummeting stock price, unaware that the real crisis was walking through his door. "Richard Harmon?" Diana's voice cut through the room as agents positioned themselves at every exit. His face registered confusion, then recognition as he saw me standing behind her. "What is the meaning of this? Security!" "Your security team is currently being interviewed by our agents, Mr. Harmon." Diana handed him the warrant. "This authorizes us to seize all documents, computers, and electronic devices related to the financial crimes outlined herein." "Financial crimes?" he sputtered, looking around the room at the shell-shocked executives. "This is absurd. Who is behind this?" His eyes locked on me. "Reeves, this is your doing?" I remained silent as agents began securing computers and files. "You think anyone will believe a disgruntled ex-employee, a homeless person?" He spat the last words. "They'll believe the evidence," I finally said. "The same evidence you tried to erase." Diana motioned for me to step back, but Richard wasn't finished. "You were nothing here, a number cruncher we tolerated because you worked cheap." His face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You think this will get you your pathetic little job back, your sad little life?" I smiled then. "No, Richard. I have a new job now. Consulting for the FBI at $15,000 an hour. Nice shoes, by the way. Italian?" His mouth opened and closed, speechless for perhaps the first time in his life. Diana gave me a warning look, but couldn't quite hide her smile. "Mr. Harmon, please gather your personal effects." You'll be coming with us for questioning." The scene repeated across the city. Vanessa was apprehended trying to board a private flight to Bermuda. Thomas Green surrendered at his country club, escorted out in handcuffs past his fellow members. By evening, the story dominated financial news. FBI raids Marion Technologies, executives detained in fraud investigation. 2 days later, I sat in a different kind of meeting. The U.S. Attorney had called a settlement conference, offering Meridian's board of directors, minus the indicted executives, a choice: cooperate fully in prosecuting the individual perpetrators in exchange for a deferred prosecution agreement for the company itself. "The alternative is corporate death," explained AUSA Margaret Wilson. "Criminal indictment, license revocations, debarment from government contracts." The interim CEO, a pale, shell-shocked man named Douglas Ward, looked directly at me. "You could have taken this evidence to Sentinel." "They would have made you rich. Why the FBI?" "Because some things aren't for sale," I answered. In the end, they accepted the deal. Richard, Vanessa, and 3 other executives would face the full force of federal prosecution. The company would survive under strict oversight and after paying $1.2 billion in fines and restitution. Outside the federal courthouse, after the plea arrangements were announced, Jason Forrester approached me. "I want to apologize," he said, extending his hand. "I should have spoken up sooner." I hesitated before accepting the handshake. "Why didn't you?" "Fear, mortgages, kids in college." He shook his head. "All the usual excuses people use to compromise. And now? I'm helping restructure the company. New leadership, new ethics policies." He paused. "We could use someone like you." I laughed. "I'm pretty sure my consulting fee is out of your budget range now." He smiled ruefully. "Probably. But if you ever change your mind." As Jason walked away, Diana joined me on the courthouse steps. "The director wants to talk to you about a permanent position," she said. "Financial Crimes Division could use someone with your skills." I considered the offer. The past 2 months had given me purpose again, along with housing, income, and a new wardrobe that included shoes that actually fit properly. "I'm thinking of starting my own consulting firm," I told her, "specializing in corporate ethics and fraud prevention." She nodded approvingly. "Good call. You'll make 3 times what we can pay you." "It's not about the money," I said. "It's about changing the system from the inside." That weekend, I visited my sister Janet for the first time since my fall. She'd followed the news of the Meridian scandal, but knew nothing of my involvement until I arrived at her door in my new suit with a healthy bank account and a second chance at life. "Michael, what happened?" she asked after the initial shock wore off. "How are you part of this?" Over dinner, I told her everything. About the shoes, the fraud, the streets. About Curtis and Agent Mercer and second chances. When I finished, my niece Sarah, now 7, looked at me with wide eyes. "Are you a hero, Uncle Mike?" I thought about Curtis, who was now in a veterans program I'd helped him find. About the junior analysts at Meridian, who would now work in an environment where integrity was valued. About my grandfather's portfolio, which now contained the business license for my new consulting firm. "No, sweetheart," I answered honestly. "Just someone who finally learned what matters more than shoes." 1 year later, I stood at the podium in Meridian Technologies' newly renovated conference center, addressing 200 employees. The company had survived, though diminished in size and chastened in ambition. The sign outside now read, "New Meridian Group," a rebranding recommended by my consulting firm. "Ethical infrastructure isn't about compliance checkboxes," I explained. "It's about creating systems where doing the right thing is easier than doing the wrong thing." In the front row sat Douglas Ward, now the permanent CEO, nodding earnestly. Beside him was Jason, who'd been promoted to Chief Ethics Officer, a position that hadn't existed in the old Meridian. My quarterly workshops were part of their deferred prosecution agreement, but the engagement had grown into something more meaningful, a genuine attempt to rebuild a corporate culture from the ground up. After the session, Jason walked me to the elevator. "Hard to believe it's been a year," he said. "Have you heard about Richard?" I had. Richard Harmon had pleaded guilty to 16 federal charges, receiving an 8-year sentence in a minimum security prison. The financial penalties had claimed his mansion, his vacation properties, even his children's trust funds. Vanessa had turned state's evidence against him in exchange for a reduced sentence of 3 years. Thomas Green was serving 5 years and had been ordered to pay $14 million in restitution. "I saw him at the sentencing," I admitted. "He wouldn't look at me." "Does that bother you?" I considered the question. Not anymore. My consulting firm, Integrity Analytics, had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We now employed 17 people, including Curtis, who'd completed his veterans program and now served as our office manager. We'd helped the SEC and FBI with 4 major fraud investigations and advised 11 companies on ethical restructuring. Our fees started at $15,000 per day, a number I'd chosen deliberately, remembering Richard's mockery. My sister Janet handled our finances, finally putting her accounting degree to use after years as a stay-at-home mom. "You saved me from suburb madness," she joked, though we both knew who had saved whom. I'd purchased a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing flashy, nothing ostentatious. The 2nd bedroom served as a home office, while the 3rd I kept ready for emergencies, people needing a temporary place to land. So far, it had housed 4 individuals transitioning from homelessness, 3 of whom had successfully moved on to permanent housing. The nightmares had mostly stopped, the ones where I was back under the overpass, cold and hopeless. But I kept the last pair of worn-out shoes I'd had on the streets, placed visibly on a shelf in my closet, a reminder. Every month, I returned to the shelter on Albany Street with donations and time. The intake worker who'd once turned me away now greeted me by name. "You know you don't have to keep coming back," she told me once. "You've more than paid it forward." "It's not about paying anything back," I explained. "It's about remembering what matters." What mattered, I'd learned, wasn't the brand of your shoes or the title on your business card. What mattered was what you did when the choices were hardest, when integrity was expensive. I'd created a foundation with part of my whistleblower reward, $4.6 million, calculated as a percentage of the recovered funds. The Michael Reeves Integrity Scholarship now supported 12 students annually, selected not for their GPAs, but for demonstrated ethical leadership. The journalist who interviewed me for the Financial Times asked if I felt vindicated by how things had turned out. "Vindication suggests I was focused on proving others wrong," I told her. "This wasn't about being right. It was about doing right." "No desire for revenge?" she pressed. "Revenge is backward-looking," I said. "I'm more interested in what comes next." What came next was both smaller and larger than I could have imagined. Smaller in that my daily life had a quietness to it, work that mattered, relationships that nurtured, purpose that sustained. Larger in the ripple effects, the companies that operated differently because of our interventions, the students whose educations we supported, the lives touched in ways I might never know. 6 weeks ago, I'd received an unexpected letter, forwarded through my attorney. The return address was a federal correctional institution. "Mr. Reeves," Richard had written in shaky handwriting, unlike his once confident scrawl, "I find myself with ample time for reflection. While I cannot undo the harm my actions caused to so many, including you, I want you to know that I recognize the courage it took to stand against corruption, even at great personal cost. My therapist suggests making amends is part of rehabilitation. I don't expect forgiveness, merely to acknowledge the truth. You showed more integrity in 12 shoes than I managed in a lifetime of Italian leather." I hadn't responded. Some circles didn't need closing. Yesterday, I found myself back at the public library, where Agent Mercer had found me at my lowest point. I'd come to donate a computer lab, 12 workstations with resume-building software and financial literacy programs, designed specifically for job seekers without resources. As the library director gave me a tour of the space that would house the lab, I noticed a man hunched over a worn laptop, his clothes clean but dated, his expression intense with concentration. Something in his posture and the determined set of his shoulders reminded me of myself from another lifetime. "Excuse me a moment," I told the director. The man looked up warily as I approached. I recognized the look, the instinctive defensiveness of someone expecting to be moved along, told they've stayed too long, taken up too much space. "I couldn't help noticing you're working on what looks like a financial analysis," I said, gesturing to his spreadsheet. Surprise replaced wariness. "Yeah. Trying to make sense of some discrepancies I've found at work." He hesitated. Not that anyone's listening. I handed him my card. "I'm Michael Reeves. I run a firm that specializes in exactly that kind of listening." He studied the embossed card with my title, Founder, Integrity Analytics. "I can't afford consultants," he said, but there was a question in his voice. "First consultation's free," I told him, "especially for people who notice things others miss." As I walked away, I felt the weight of my grandfather's portfolio under my arm. I'd had it restored, the leather conditioned and stitching repaired. Inside it now were the founding documents of my firm, our ethical charter, and a single photograph. Me under the highway overpass with Curtis and the others, taken by a sociology student doing a project on homelessness. I'd tracked her down 6 months after my resurrection to acquire the print. The world divides people into categories, successful or failed, valuable or disposable, worthy or worthless. I'd been on both sides now, sometimes within the same day. What I'd learned, what I'd tried to teach companies brave enough to listen, was that these divisions were illusions, convenient fictions that allowed some to walk past others as if they were invisible. In my darkest moments under that overpass, I'd been seen by Curtis, who had nothing but still shared half a sandwich. In my brightest moments in courtrooms and conference rooms, I'd been overlooked by those who only saw shoes and suits. The measure of any system, corporate, legal, social, was how it treated people regardless of what they wore on their feet. Last week, my niece Sarah asked me a question as we worked together on her school project. "Uncle Mike, are you glad about what happened, even the bad parts?" I thought about it carefully. "I'm not glad it happened, but I'm grateful for what it taught me." "What's that?" she asked, eyes serious behind her glasses. "That worth isn't something other people get to assign to you, and that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what can't be taken away." She nodded solemnly, in that way children do when they're storing wisdom for later. Then she returned to her project, a display about workplace ethics for her junior business club. The title read, "Integrity Isn't Negotiable." As I stand now at the window of my office, watching Boston's financial district pulse with activity, I think about the billions that flow through these buildings daily, the decisions made in rooms much like the one where I was once humiliated. I think about Richard in his prison cell and Vanessa in hers. I think about the students receiving our scholarships and the whistleblowers our legal aid fund has supported. The shoes I'm wearing today cost more than $12, but less than what many executives spend on lunch. They're comfortable, professional, unremarkable. Just shoes. Not a statement, not a measure of worth. Just a practical tool for walking the path I've chosen, a path that led from corner offices to street corners and back again, teaching me at each step that character isn't about where you stand, but what you stand for. My grandfather was right. Integrity isn't negotiable, but he never told me how expensive it could be, or how priceless. If this story touched your soul, if you believe justice exists and that we can rise from the ashes, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell. In the comments, share your own story of overcoming adversity. Let's support each other. Share this video with someone going through a difficult time. Remember, your story isn't over yet, and the best chapters may be yet to come. There are two incredible stories appearing on your screen now. Choose one to continue this journey of hope. Until next time, and may you find your own victorious turning point. God bless you.